So in our next video, for us now to generate the non-food poverty line based on the per share price index, we're going to run this code. And in this code, we're simply saying that the non-food poverty line is just the mean of this variable that we created here, just the mean of it. And then we're going to replace the non-food poverty line, again, making sure that we're rounding this to a whole number, and then also generate the food poverty share, which is now looking at the food poverty line based on the per share price index, and this will be divided by the sum of the food poverty line and then also the non-food poverty line. And then we can summarize this share, and then we can also look at drop the variables that we don't need. Let's run this code snippet, and then we can see what has been generated. And then as you can see that the food poverty share is about 69 percent based on the calculations that we've just did here. And then next what we do is to now generate the poverty line the total poverty line based on this per share price index, and then also compute what we call the poor based on this particular calculation that we've done. So what we do again is just to generate the total poverty line based on the per share, which is simply the raw sum of the food poverty line based on the per share price index, plus just to add the non-food poverty line. We can summarize our poverty line and then also rename this as our ultra poverty line. So let's just generate this statistic and based on this code, and then it does say that the total poverty line that we're going to use is actually 176 595 Malawi kwacha. Okay, then next we can do the same, but now we want to compute the poor based on this poverty line, and then it's simply we're going to say generate a variable called poor, which is just simply the real expenditure aggregate per capita based on the per share price index for those who are less than this poverty line, the one we have computed, and also making sure that this real expenditure aggregate per capita based on the per share price index is also not missing. And remember that we also wanted to compare this with those who are values when we normalize, we winsorize the data, how different is our poverty estimate going to be. And then we're also going to generate this poor based on normalized data, which is simply this real expenditure aggregate per capita for the normalized. Those who are less than the poverty line are those who are regarded as poor. And then also making sure that this is also not missing. Then the Ultrapoor are simply the same, but now we're just defining those who are less than the ultra poverty line based on the per share price index, and also making sure that they're not missing. And then also the normalized will be the same based on that. So again, we can just run that and then generate these new variables of interest. We run it, and then next what we're going to do is do the similar approach, and now this will be based on the adult equivalent scales, right? So paste it here, and simply what we're doing here is again generate the non-food poverty line for the adult equivalence, and this is just the mean for the air temp variable that we generated, and this is pretty simply this one based on the median thresholds that we created. And then we're going to replace that again, making sure it's rounded to 1. It's just a whole number, and then we also generate the share. Let's just run this to see what it generates. And then again, if we can also summarize the data, the new variables of interest based on the ADAT equivalence scales, and then you can see that in this case it's about 58%. That's the share. So that's based on the ADAT equivalence scales. And then we can also generate the total poverty line for this ADAT equivalence factor. Again, it's the same, which is just the raw sum of the poverty line, the food poverty line based on ADAT equivalence, and then also the non-food poverty line based on the ADAT equivalence scales. We can summarize our poverty and then also rename it as ultra-poverty line, the food poverty line. Run it, and then you see this is about 122,250 Malawi kwacha as the poverty line that we're going to use in this analysis. Then we can just finish up generating also these variables of interest. The poor based on ADAT equivalence. Again, it's simple. Those who are less than the poverty line, and also if this is not missing, and then also the normalized ADAT equivalence. Again, those who are less than the poverty line, and then the same applies for those who are also based on the food poverty line, that is the ultra poor. Again, run that code, and then we should have all the necessary data that we've generated. Now, again, what we're going to do is keep the variables of interest, because this is now we have poverty data. We're going to keep the case ID, the ultra-poor, the poor, the poverty line, ultra-poverty line, and then, of course, our real expenditure variables, and then the deciles that we've computed, and then just reorder them based on this. So, again, we can run that, and this also creates our variables of interest, just to ensure that we have everything. This is good. Again, the variables have to be labeled because they are new, and then what we're going to do is to label our variables. Okay. And then what we do now is label our variables. So again, because it's poor, we're going to define a label which is now 1 if poor, 0 if they are non-poor, and then also for the ultra poor, we're also going to define a label for it, and then label 1 if it's ultra poor and 0 if it's not poor, because that's what we've been generating there. All right, then again we're going to label the variables of interest, and then label the variables as consumption aggregate per capita less that are under the poverty line based on the Pache price index. Again, this is the normalized one, and then those based on the ADAT equivalent scales. Again, and then also this now, it's what is important here. This is now based on calories that they consume, and then also here we're looking at the ADAT equivalence scales, then i.e. and normalized. Then also the poverty lines, we label them. This is poverty line in Malawi kwacha based on Pache per annum, and then also poverty line MK based on ADAT equivalent scales per annum. All right. So here Pache price index, and then we can also add notes that the poor 1 if poor, and then 0 otherwise, and that the poverty line is just ultra poverty line plus the food basic needs. That's the poverty line. Okay, so once that is done, we can now label our variables. Just label everything. As usual, we can just describe to see if indeed our variables of interest have been labeled, and indeed you see that all variables are assigned a label. Okay. Good. We're good here. All right. And then you can view the data. You can see these are Ultrapoor, poor, we've defined, which is good. And then next we can now just summarize our data, see what we've also generated. And then if we run this code snippet, of course here we haven't set any survey, we haven't set the complex survey. We'll do that in the next module, where we're going to look at these poverty estimates in detail. So again, run this, and then we see that it's just showcasing the distribution, not necessarily saying that these are indeed the poor people at the inference population. That will do it in the next module. So then what remains is now for us just to merge this with our data file, and then of course go on to the next module, not module but section, where we are going to rebase our consumption aggregates, and then so we merge it, describe what we have now. We're merging this with the IHS poverty, just short. Let's just see what's there, and then label the data that this is the Malawi IHS 2019-2020 annual consumption expenditure aggregate, poverty lines as well as poverty indicators, and then we can just now run that, and then that's our data, and then save this as in the variables data file. Okay. Again, what we can do, because we want to make sure that they also are contained in the variables DTA file, we just want to make sure that this again we have all the data. So we have 2,427 variables that we can use as covariates, dependent variables and covariates when we are running regressions. So next we're going to go through the process of how do we rebase the computed consumption aggregates.